Hello, everyone. My name is David Su, and today I'm joined with our guest speaker, Mr. Kevin Kish, who is the director for California's Department of Civil Rights. And today we'll be focusing on a major organization, which is California versus Hate, which is part of the California's Department of Civil Rights. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with this organization in this department of the state?
Sure. Thanks, David. I'm happy to be here. My name is Kevin Kish. I'm the director of the Civil Rights Department in California. Um, I think you're asking a little bit about my own personal background. I actually grew up in Virginia, but I've lived in California now for 20 years. But I grew up in Virginia, and my family is Quaker. And so uh, growing up, we talked a lot about social justice. We talked a lot about fairness and equality. We talked a lot about social justice movements and movements for civil rights throughout the country's history. So that's kind of where things got planted in my mind. I went to Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia, which was founded by Quakers. And so there's that Quaker focus on trying to make the world a better place there. And ultimately, I went to law school and I was a legal aid lawyer for about a decade, representing poor people, many immigrant families, mostly in employment cases. So people who had not been paid for the work that they were doing or who were being paid illegally for the work that they were doing. And after doing that, I was appointed by the governor to lead the Civil Rights Department. At the time, it was called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. But this department has power to enforce a lot more laws than just laws protecting our civil rights in employment and in housing. So we are now called the Civil Rights Department.
Wow, that's a really, really great story and good to hear more about you. Is there anything specific when you were a child that influenced you to want to go into public service and go into the Civil Rights Department?
Yeah, I think some of what I talked about growing up in a Quaker family, um, we learned a lot about um, abolition of slavery in this country and Quakers' roles in that. We learned a lot about the civil rights movement. We learned a lot about the various social justice movements of the last century, the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, um, the Asian American rights movement. And so I think all of those influences or conversations and topics did influence me. When I went to law school, I knew that I wanted to work to help people, that I wanted to use law as a tool to help people. I don't think law is the only tool out there, or necessarily even the most important one in a lot of circumstances, but in some circumstances, law is a really powerful tool. So representing people who weren't paid legally for their work or weren't paid at all, law is a powerful tool to try and get wages that they earned back into their pockets. And law can be a powerful tool in the context of civil rights as well. In fact, um, passing a law doesn't mean that you change people's lives on the ground. Enforcing a law that is passed can change people's lives on the ground. And so it was an honor for me to be appointed to lead this department, which has as its goal, as its mission, enforcing the laws that protect all of our rights to be treated equally in the workplace and in our housing and in businesses and in all areas of our lives.
Yeah, well, I also think it's really, really great that even from a young age, you were able to have the conversations with your family about all these different issues and all these different movements within society. Because oftentimes there's a stigma of like about mental health or about AAPI communities that happens, and it often makes families and communities not able to talk about it because of this stigma. So I think it's really, really great that from a young age, you're able to go against the stigma and still be able to learn more about all these different issues. So
Thank you.
also, yeah, of course. You also talked about how law led you to this idea of helping out other people, how enforcing the law is a lot more impactful than just like passing the law. So can you also tell us about how how your current role as director of California's Civil Rights Department led you to knowing that you made the impact on communities.
Yeah. So, you know, let me talk a little bit about the Civil Rights Department and why we're here and what we do for people in the state. Um, if your civil rights are violated, now this can happen to students, right, in school. This can happen when you get a job. If you are turned away from a job because of who you are, not because of your qualifications. When you're trying to get an apartment, um, if you are turned away because of your race, your religion, your national origin, your disability, your sexual orientation, or any of a number of characteristics that we all have, right? If you're turned away for these reasons or treated differently and less well because of these reasons, you do have a couple of options. Um, what happens most of the time is nothing, right? Most people whose civil rights are violated never complain to anyone, or maybe they complain to their families or to a therapist or to their pastor or religious figure or someone in their lives, a friend, but they don't complain um, necessarily to their boss or to the landlord or to the government. But one thing that can happen is you can go get a lawyer, right? And you can bring a case if you've experienced a violation of law. But what the Civil Rights Department does is says you don't actually have to get a lawyer and go file a lawsuit in court. You can ask the government to investigate what happened to you. And this is great because a lot of times people don't actually know what happened to them if something bad happened. They didn't get the job, they didn't get the promotion, they didn't get the apartment, they don't know why. You can ask the state to investigate. And so if you file a complaint for a civil rights violation with the Civil Rights Department, we will investigate it. And there are a couple of things that can happen. One thing that can happen is we can say, okay, we investigated, we're not going to do anything, but you have the right to go forward in court if you want to go forward in court with a legal claim. Another thing that can happen, though, is that we have mediators who are working around the state who help people resolve their disputes and reach some kind of resolution. And we resolve hundreds and hundreds of civil rights disputes every year through our mediation. And another thing that can happen is we can say, what happened is really wrong and it's really important. And we, the Civil Rights Department, are going to file a lawsuit in court. And it's going to be the state saying something happened here that was wrong, that violated the law. And we're going to try to, what we say, vindicate the rights of the person or enforce the rights of the person whose rights were violated. So my role leading the organization, like a lot of leadership roles, I do a lot of things that that have to do with IT, that have to do with human resources, that have to do with making sure that our forms are filed. But one of the things that I enjoy most doing is working with our investigators and our lawyers to decide what do we think happened in this case? And is this something that we think we can make right? Can we make an impact if we take action here? And I really love that part of the job.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining to the audience members that don't know what this department does and how it benefits so many different families and so many different groups in California. So thank you for explaining what that is. But also a section of this is also that this organization also has California versus hate, which is another big part, which it also has the reporting system. Could you explain a little bit about what California versus hate is?
Absolutely. So California versus hate is a hotline, but it's not just a hotline. We call it a resource line. And so people who experience an act of hate in the state of California have the option of calling California versus hate. And what happens when you call is that or file a report online is that if you want to, you will be connected with someone that we call a care coordinator. And this is someone who's going to help you identify what it is that you think you need after experiencing an act of hate. I can tell you that a lot of people don't file legal reports when they experience an act of hate, right? They don't call the police necessarily. They don't call the Civil Rights Department to start an investigation. Why? Because they don't really want that, right? Most people who experience, and now, of course, there are many different types of acts of hate. Some of them are crimes, some of them are violations of other types of laws. But by and large, I find that when someone experiences what they understand to be an act of hate, what they want is support and they want other people to be protected, right? They don't want it to happen again. And so, what California versus hate does is it provides that support. It says, if you call and you say, look, my grandmother experienced an act of hate, and I think that she would benefit from counseling, and she speaks Mandarin, right? We can try and connect that person who called and their family to a counselor who can provide counseling services in Mandarin or whatever language the person speaks. Or we can help connect the caller to a social support group, or we can help connect them to a legal aid organization, or we can help connect them to any number, more than 100 different types of services and organizations that can help people depending on what they need if they experience an act of hate. So it's outside of law enforcement. We can help them connect with law enforcement, with police, if that's what they want to do. We can help connect them with a lawyer if that's what they want to do. But we can also help connect people with all kinds of different services. And sometimes it helps people just to say, hey, something bad happened to me and I want somebody to know about it and I want to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, well, it's really, really great that you have these resources that the public can use. So how do the people find California versus hate? How do you outreach? How do you make sure that these communities that have that, or these people and individuals that have these hate crimes or hate speech against them, how do they find California versus hate and make a report to get these resources?
Yeah, so that is a really great question, David, because something that I've found is that most people don't walk around the world with a list of numbers and websites that they need to have just in case something happens to them, right? And so most people aren't actually looking for us until something bad happens. So it is important for us to be easily found. One way that we do that is through outreach and education, right? We send our teams to all different kinds of events throughout the state. And we like to go to festivals where people are actually celebrating, where people are gathering, because that's where people are. And so we have a lot of on the ground physical presence. We have posters, we have cards, we have all different flyers, all different kinds of materials that people can take and hand out so that you can give out to the people in your school. But we also have a website and an online presence. And one of the great things about this website for California versus hate is that there are materials that you can take and use, right? So, as one example, we have a lot of materials for schools to take, and you can customize these materials for your own school. They are available in multiple languages. And I will give you the website. I just want to make sure that I give you the right one. You can, of course, Google California versus hate. But the website, if you want to go directly, is californiaversushate.org. That's CAVSHATE.org.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this resource so people can find California versus hate if they need it, or just learn more about this section as a whole. But how have you seen California versus hate directly impact California directly? Are there certain numbers? How many reports has happened showing that this is a great? We all know that's a great resource, but can you explain how it's working and how it's directly impacting the citizens?
Yeah, so just last week, I think we released data from the very first full calendar year of California versus hate. And, that data showed, gosh, let me make sure that I have the right numbers. So we're talking about 2024, so last calendar year. We got thousands of contacts And out of those, so people can contact us for any reason. They can call or file a report. Um, Not all of those are people who want to report an act of hate, but out of those contacts, we received nearly 1,200 reports of hate. That's a lot of people. We got them from most of the counties in the state. And a number that I think is really important for people to hear is that about 2 out of 3 of those people agreed to follow up for our care coordination, meaning they wanted help accessing resources.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those numbers. It's great to hear how effective California versus hate is, and that people actually want the resource and want to take action to solve the problem as well. And for many young people or marginalized communities that aren't too familiar with California Department of Civil Rights and stuff, what is the best way to engage or learn or become more involved with it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that people can do. I want to be mindful and respectful of the fact that most people don't want to put government agencies on the top of their list of things to do, but we do have a good social media presence. So you can follow the department, the Civil Rights Department on Instagram, um, which is probably the social media platform that most students would be also on, that they could find us on. Um, you can also go to our website and sign up for a newsletter. And this newsletter, I promise we will not spam you. The newsletter comes out about once a month. It's only a page or two long. And in this newsletter, you'll learn about things that are happening in the civil rights world in California. So you'll learn about big cases that have been filed or settled. You'll learn about outreach activities that are going on. You'll learn about things like when we release the data from California versus hate. So it's actually a good resource for people who are interested in civil rights and the world of civil rights, which really is all of us, to learn about what's going on in kind of an ongoing basis in a way that isn't going to take too much of your time.
Yeah. Is there also anything else that you suggest people can do to try to prevent any hate acts to even happen in the first place? Um,
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. It's like nobody wants this stuff to happen. So how do we stop it from happening? Something that I think about a lot is that hate isn't new. It's not like this is a new phenomenon. It's not like it started this year or with COVID or with anything. You know, People and communities have been experiencing acts of hate for as long as there have been people and communities, certainly in the state of California since its very inception. So we're not going to be able to stop everything bad from happening. Um, One thing that I've learned is that people want to feel that they are not alone, right? And so if people feel that they're not alone, including by accessing resources through California versus Hate, sorry, I have to cough. I should have brought water to this. Um, I think that having those resources in place helps. Another thing that we know helps prevent things in the first place is having a culture where it's not accepted, right? So telling people, we think such and such is bad, right? We think bullying is bad, um, doesn't tend to have much of an effect, right? I mean, it can have an effect, right? Especially if it's a person, teachers, principals, administrators, parents saying, we don't think this is right. What tends to have an effect is people learning that that value system is widely shared. So, for example, within a school, it can be very powerful for students to hear. Actually, we took a survey, and students overwhelmingly think that bullying is wrong and is a problem. And the second people hear, oh, I'm not alone, other people feel the same way that I do, and by the way, it's true. Almost all of us feel that way, right? Nobody wants to experience acts of hate. Nobody wants to live in a town or in a community where acts of hate are happening. When we talk about how we commonly hold this value, that actually social science research suggests has an effect in making it less likely that acts of hate are going to happen. So, on a school campus, for example, you know, talking openly and messaging about what the values of that school are, what the values of that organization is, can have an effect, and much more of an effect than simply someone saying, don't do X or don't do Y.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this and telling everyone about how it's a problem and that we have to address it, as well as it's not a quick one simple solution to just solve, but it takes time and every small thing adds up. Is there a specific problem that really worries you that you hope that the next generation of policymakers, advocates, whatever, hope to hopefully solve?
Um, how much time do you have? I think there are a lot of problems. Some of the problems are very old, right? The problem of hate is very old. Um, and individuals and communities have, for generations and generations, come up with their own solutions. California versus hate is one solution, one manifestation of that. Um, uh, and so that's a very old problem. But old problems can sometimes take new forms. So one of the things that I think about is social media, right? Especially for young people. And we did a survey of Californians in collaboration with UCLA. It's called the California Health Interview Survey, and we did this. We published results earlier this year, showing that many, many, many young people are experiencing acts of hate in California, and where it's happening tends to be at school and online, right? So for adults, a lot of where things happen might be in where you live. It might be at work. It might be on the street or visiting a business. And for students and school age people, it tends to be at school and online. And one challenge that I think we have is figuring out what do we do with our online lives, and how can we um, spread the values that we might be able to spread more easily in person in our physical community into our online community. Um, we have not solved that problem. I don't think we've gotten close to solving the problem of bullying and hate online. And that is something that I think young leaders are going to have to be focused on going forward.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing this. Is there one message that you want to leave behind to the future generation, to the future generation of lawmakers, policymakers, activists, and youth in general?
Yeah, again, I have lots of messages, but here are two. One is it doesn't actually, in my personal view, matter who you are or what you do. You can always be a civil rights worker, right? You don't have to become a lawyer. You don't have to become a legislator. We need civil rights workers who are doctors and nurses, who are technologists, who are coders, who are mathematicians, who are working in physical professions. We need civil rights people fixing cars. And there is no profession or life course where you can't be a civil rights advocate and a civil rights worker. And we see this from our own history, right? Um, think about Rosa Parks. Think about the people who have led civil rights movements and have been forceful figures in civil rights movements. These people were people from all walks of life. You do not have to be rich. You do not have to be famous. You can be a civil rights worker no matter what you do. And the other message that I would leave is one of the great benefits of being young is um, wondering why the world is the way it is, right? Why is this like this? This doesn't seem fair. And it can be easy as we grow older um, to kind of start saying, well, that's the way it is. But almost nothing about the way we live has been the way it is for very long. Right? I mean, the steel plow was invented 200 years ago. Almost everything about our lives is relatively new. And so try to hold on to that question. Well, why is it this way? Sometimes maybe there are good reasons why something is the way it is, but a lot of times it's just because, well, whoever was there before did it that way. And so my advice or recommendation is hold on to that question. Hold on to the question why.
Okay. Well, thank you for that message. I hope everyone thinks about that and brings it into how they bring into their day. And thank you so much for sharing and teaching to everyone about what California Department of Civil Rights does, as well as what California versus Hate does. It has been a true honor to meet and interview you. So on behalf of AAPI Youth Rising, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.